Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take the sources you send us, really get into them, and pull out what matters most. Today, we're looking at a story that's, well, it's been everywhere. The recent news about Lil Nas X, lots of reports about hospitalization, maybe an overdose, and this really bizarre incident, him apparently charging at police in his underwear.
Yeah, it sounds pretty intense.
Totally. But that specific moment, shocking as it is, seems like just the tip of the iceberg. Because leading up to it, his social media was, well, it got really strange.
Right.
Like deleting all his old posts, changing his display name to Queen Madeline, which is, quite a statement.
Definitely stands out.
And sharing unreleased music, but over these mirror selfies with like piles of junk around his place and pictures of furniture just randomly, chaotically arranged. So, okay, let's unpack this, because we're not just talking about, one celebrity's difficult time. We're using the insights from our listener sources, and mainly this really interesting Reddit thread about the whole thing to kind of explore something bigger, that intersection of mental health crises, substance use, and, the crazy pressure of being globally famous.
Yeah, and what's really striking about this as we start digging in is how that online community, Reddit in this case, which sometimes gets dismissed, right?
Sure.
How it actually becomes this sort of informal hub for mental health awareness. People there aren't just like gawking, they're sharing their own experiences, recognizing patterns.
Using their lived experience, kind of?
Exactly, as a sort of diagnostic tool almost.
Yeah.
Often way faster than the mainstream news cycle catches on to the potential red flags.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's this collective pattern recognition, driven by personal stories, by empathy. It offers a really powerful alternative to just like sensational headlines. It pushes us to look for the actual human story under all the celebrity stuff.
A sort of crowdsourced early warning system.
You could say that, yeah. It shows the power of people sharing vulnerably.
Okay, so let's look at those early observations from the Reddit thread. Because the picture people painted was honestly pretty alarming. It wasn't just the flurry of bizarre posts or dropping those unexpected full-length songs.
Which is unusual in itself for an artist like him.
Right. But what really seemed to hit home for a lot of users was this detail about the furniture, the random and chaotic arrangements. Someone shared their friend did the exact same thing, like just days before having a full psychotic break.
Wow.
Another person even said they thought, damn, just like Emma, when they saw Lil Nas X's posts. They recognized it immediately. So what is it about rearranging furniture? Seems so. Mundane almost, but it clearly signifies something deeper for people who've seen it before.
That's a really key question. It taps into these subtle but often really profound ways the mind tries to cope when reality starts feeling wrong.
Okay.
So when someone's heading towards or is in a psychotic episode, their whole perception can shift. Their environment, the room they're in, might suddenly feel, inherently unbalanced or just off.
Like the energy is wrong. Someone mentioned that phrase.
Exactly, because the energy needed to be fixed. That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
So rearranging the furniture isn't just random fidgeting. It's often this subconscious, almost desperate attempt to regain some kind of control.
Trying to reorder the outside world when the inside feels chaotic.
Precisely. It's making the invisible struggle visible in a way. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, these aren't just, quirky artist things. They can be part of a whole constellation of symptoms signaling something serious.
And alongside the furniture, there was that detail about the wall of unintelligible marker pen scribbles.
Yeah.
Someone living in a city with a big meth problem said that's totally typical for people in meth psychosis. They described how folks will just draw random scribbles, weird shapes, faces, little notes about themselves or others, just anywhere they can, walls, paper, whatever.
Yeah.
It paints such a vivid and frankly concerning picture of a mind just overflowing maybe, trying to get something out.
Exactly. Those visual things, the frantic scribbling, the really bizarre art, they often act as these powerful, almost universal red flags, at least for people familiar with mental health crises.
So to an outsider, maybe it looks like weird art.
Right, or just being eccentric. But if you know the signs, you see it as this attempt to, externalize something overwhelming and maybe incomprehensible that's happening inside. It's pattern recognition again. Seeing the common ways the human mind reacts under extreme stress, whether that's from drugs or an underlying condition.
The personal stories in the sources really bring home just how intense and bewildering these psychotic breaks can be.
Absolutely.
One user talked about their friend who didn't just rearrange furniture, but also invented an entirely new form of math and physics as well as numbers and letters.
Whoa.
And it makes you pause, like the user said, thinking, or maybe he's unlocked the mysteries of the universe and nobody will ever believe him. That's kind of a tragic thought, isn't it?
It really is.
But how do you tell the difference between that kind of intense, maybe genius-level focus, even if it's unusual, and a clear break from reality?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's such a fine line sometimes. The brain in that state can genuinely feel like it's making these huge breakthroughs, seeing connections no one else does, maybe even, unlocking mysteries.
Right.
I mean, creativity often pushes boundaries, but the real difference, the line that gets crossed, is that profound detachment from shared reality.
Okay.
It's when those discoveries become these absolute, unshakable delusions, when they stop the person from functioning, holding a job, maintaining relationships, basic safety stuff. That's when you know. The intense output becomes a symptom, not just a quirk.
And it can be devastating afterwards, too, right? The sources mention people questioning what's reality versus what isn't for ages.
Oh, absolutely. It's shattering. It can take a very, very long time to rebuild that sense of a stable reality.
And that reality check comes through loud and clear in some other accounts. Like another user said, any idea of maybe they know something I don't just vanishes when they start saying things like, you're not my dad, Uncle John is my dad, or insisting someone else's kid is theirs.
Yeah, that's when the delusion becomes undeniable.
We also heard about the friend who went from rearranging furniture to ripping up floorboards in the middle of the night to renovate the rental property.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you can just imagine the landlord finding that. It shows how the internal logic just completely takes over, overriding any thought of consequences.
Total disconnect.
And then that really poignant story about the friend who got obsessed with infinity while smoking weed. It started small, then just grew over weeks, took over everything, ending with a schizophrenia diagnosis and needing inpatient care.
It's heartbreaking, and it shows how these things can sometimes develop gradually, not always a sudden snap.
So it's clear that while every experience is unique, there are these common, really devastating themes.
Definitely. The intensity, the shifted perception, that feeling of uncovering secret truths, but all leading to this profound disconnect from the reality the rest of us share.
And the idea that step one is hoping you realize you're in a break.
That becomes almost impossible when your own mind is telling you you're the only sane one and everyone else is wrong. That's why intervention, even if it's resisted, is often so necessary.
Which brings us to potential causes or triggers. The discussion moved pretty quickly into things like recreational drugs, but also prescription meds.
Right.
Someone asked that question, probably relatable for some. You ever try to contemplate infinity on weed? But underlying it was a real concern about schizo from weed, especially if there's a family history of mental illness. It's not just a joke, it's a genuine worry.
It is. The link between cannabis use, especially heavy use of high-potency strains, and psychosis, particularly in vulnerable individuals, is something researchers are still untangling, but the concern is definitely valid.
And then people speculated about maybe a multi-day amphetamine break or meth psychosis being involved in Lil Nas X's case, linking it back to those scribbles and strange drawings.
Yeah, stimulant-induced psychosis is a well-documented thing. Lack of sleep, combined with the drug's effects, can absolutely trigger hallucinations, paranoia, a waking nightmare, basically.
We also heard from someone who experienced ketamine-induced psychosis for months. Months. Which caused completely manic and erratic behavior. Shows how long-lasting the effects can be for some substances.
Definitely. It's not always a short-term thing that just wears off.
And it wasn't just street drugs. People talked about the dangers of prescription meds, too. Like having psychotic episodes just from forgetting to take their SSRIs, antidepressants.
Right. Withdrawal can sometimes cause severe psychiatric symptoms.
Especially, someone pointed out, for people with undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Apparently, taking antidepressants without a mood stabilizer can be really risky, potentially triggering mania or even psychosis.
That's a crucial point. Correct diagnosis is so important because the wrong medication can actually make things much worse in bipolar disorder.
And that practical advice from the former stimulant user really stuck with me. Rule #1 was, don't touch my fucking phone. Yeah, saying the last thing someone high on stims needs is to hyper-focus on fucking Twitter. It just highlights that lack of impulse control, that obsessive focus that can happen.
That makes a lot of sense. It really brings up the question, how do all these different things, street drugs, prescription meds, withdrawing from meds, how do they actually mess with our brain chemistry to cause these huge breaks from reality?
Right.
Well, the sources seem to distinguish between, say, substance-induced psychosis, which is directly caused by the drug, and often temporary, though maybe not always short-lived, as we heard.
Like the ketamine example.
Exactly. And then underlying conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar type 1, which might be triggered or just made worse by using substances.
Okay, so the drug isn't the root cause in the second case, but it pours gasoline on the fire.
That's a good way to put it. Our brain chemistry is this incredibly delicate balance, right? And throwing powerful psychoactive chemicals into the mix or suddenly taking away meds the brain relies on can just completely disrupt neurotransmitters. That leads to the distorted perceptions, the paranoia, the hallucinations.
And someone noted Lil Nas X's age.
Yeah, that he's at the age where it usually comes out for bipolar type 1. It often first appears in the late teens or early 20s, so that adds another layer of complexity when trying to understand what might be going on.
So many potential factors.
Definitely. But it's also important that the sources mention that even if it is substance-induced, meds can still help manage the really acute symptoms and, hopefully prevent more harm.
Okay, so we've talked about the immediate signs, the triggers. But what happens when using substances, or maybe the state it induces, becomes more ingrained? The conversation in the sources went deep into the nature of addiction itself. And one comment just hit me. Addiction is the only disease where your mind actually tries to keep you sick.
That's powerful, isn't it?
It's incredibly insidious. Your own brain working against your recovery. How does that even work?
Well, people use some really good analogies. One described it as a hunger for food, except it's the drug that stops the hunger temporarily.
So the cure is the poison.
Exactly. It sets up this vicious cycle. Your body thinks it needs the drug just to feel okay, even though the drug's actually causing the problem long term.
And the brain makes excuses. Someone said, your brain will literally make excuses to itself and justify why you should use again.
Yeah, the biochemical drive is that strong. A pharmacist in the thread explained it really well, talking about how addiction sort of unlocks this primal hunger because your natural neurotransmitters get depleted.
Right, dopamine.
Dopamine, serotonin, others too. So the brain craves the substance to artificially boost those levels back up, just to feel baseline normal. They compared it to PCA.
That thing in pregnancy where women crave weird stuff.
Yeah, like craving dirt if you're low on iron. You don't consciously know why you crave it. Your body just sends this powerful signal. It's similar with addiction, this overwhelming biochemical urge.
Okay, that makes it clear why it's so hard to understand.
Yeah.
And even harder to break free from.
Totally. And that leads to the permanent itch analogy someone used, the idea that the urge might quiet down with recovery, but it never truly disappears. That buzzing in your head is basically forever present.
So it's not a lack of willpower.
Not at all. It's a fundamental change in brain wiring, which also helps explain the difference people drew between dependency and addiction.
Right, the coffee example.
Yeah, you might get a headache if you miss your coffee. That's dependency. But you're probably not going to, steal money, lie, or whatever for coffee. An addict driven by that deeper compulsion often will cross those lines.
And there's a genetic element, too.
Seems like it, yeah. The sources highlighted how some people can casually use their whole life and be fine, while others get so gripped by a substance it just won't let go, maybe even after only using it once or twice.
Wow.
So genetics, environments, it's way more complex than just making bad choices. It really underlines that recovery, while people say it's hard but entirely worth it, is often this continuous, lifelong process of managing that itch.
Okay, so bring all this back to Lil Nas X. Someone living through this, potentially struggling with mental health issues, maybe substance use, but doing it under the intense, constant glare of global fame. What does that do to a person?
Yeah, the pressure must be immense.
The sources really hammered this point. Someone said, sudden all-encompassing fame and wealth can be rough.
And pointed out why so many celebs die relatively young, often using drugs and alcohol just to cope with pressures and maybe a deep loneliness most of us can't even imagine.
Having your worst moments broadcast worldwide. Exactly. And the harassment. One person mentioned the ruthless harassment he gets online, and quite likely in person, too. And chillingly, even in this thread, supposedly a place for understanding, people are making fun of him.
That's rough.
It led to this really powerful statement. Every cunny comment and just saying contributes to an atmosphere that emboldens and supports the ones who are making direct attacks. It's like death by 1,000 cuts.
That cumulative effect of negativity.
Yeah, and then the specific pressures on him, endless label issues, flopped singles, making him feel like a failure maybe, wanting to release art but being constantly prevented. That creative frustration must be huge.
And feeling like the persona takes over.
Right. The stage persona starts becoming the real you, that loss of self. Plus, his own acknowledged struggles with internalized homophobia, quoting that lyric. These gay thoughts was always on me, and I pray God will take them from me. That's a deep internal battle on top of everything else.
It paints a picture of immense external and internal pressure, and broadening that out, fame often means, as someone put it, digging a foot down for every inch you raised on a pedestal.
Wow, yeah.
Especially for young artists, that line between the public you and the private, you can just dissolve under that spotlight. And when a crisis hits, it's not private anymore, it's a public spectacle.
Which must make it so much harder to get help.
Absolutely. It magnifies the trauma, hinders seeking help privately. And we have to acknowledge being Black, gay, and famous adds whole other layers. Those identities, while powerful, sadly attract specific, often really vicious kinds of hate and scrutiny.
So the things that make him unique also make him a target.
Unfortunately, yes, it makes navigating a crisis exponentially harder.
So given all these massive challenges, what's the way forward? The discussion turned towards support, getting professional help, and also boundaries.
Which are all crucial.
Lots of people were calling for Lil Nas X to just step back, go on a hiatus and get some mental help. Find sobriety and a safe way to begin dealing with those issues. A real plea for him to get space and support.
Sounds like the right call.
And people share their own recovery stories, saying sobriety, therapy, big lifestyle changes. That stuff was essential even years down the line. It's not a quick fix.
Definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
But then there was also talk about boundaries, but for the loved ones of people struggling. Someone said very clearly, you are not obligated to destroy yourself for someone else.
That's such an important message for families and friends. Codependency can be destructive too.
Yeah, recognizing the toll it takes. And interestingly, someone noted that setting those tough boundaries, even something harsh like being kicked out, can sometimes, paradoxically, be the trigger that causes someone to get help.
Rock bottom sometimes is necessary.
Yeah, when the safety nets are gone, maybe you're forced to finally confront it.
Which really brings up the bigger societal picture, doesn't it? How has our understanding of addiction actually changed? And why is empathy so vital here?
Yeah.
Well, one person shared this really moving reflection about watching cops as a kid, feeling excited that they busted the bad druggies. But looking back now as an adult, they just find it sad as fuck.
Seeing the human cost instead of just the crime.
Exactly. Realizing the lack of education and lack of empathy for addicts back then. And I agree, seeing addiction as a disease, not a moral failing, is the ideal shift. But have we really, truly internalized that as a society?
That's the question, isn't it? Intellectually, maybe we get it more now. But when you see the instant judgment online, the mocking, yeah, it feels like the gut reaction for many is still judgment, especially for famous people, rather than concern or compassion. The old biases seem really deep-rooted.
Precisely. And the sources strongly suggest our focus needs to shift. Away from judgment, towards active help, towards understanding, whether someone's famous like Lil Nas X or someone in our own community.
It's about seeing the person behind the crisis.
Exactly. Forging that path forward means really working to dismantle those old stigmas and actively trying to build a society that sees someone in pain, not as entertainment or a failure, but just as a human being who needs support.
It's a continuous effort, like the recovery itself.
It really is, but it's an effort that the sources you brought us today are definitely pushing us towards.
So this deep dive, looking at Lil Nas X through the lens of these shared experiences on Reddit, it's really peeled back the layers, hasn't it? Beyond the headlines, beyond the spectacle.
Definitely.
We've seen the subtle signs of psychosis, the terrifying grip of addiction, the crushing weight of fame. It's a powerful and pretty sobering look at the battles people can face, especially when they happen so publicly.
It truly is. And it leaves us, and you listening, with a provocative thought, maybe. In this world where mental health struggles and addiction often become public drama, how can we, as the audience, choose to react differently? How can we practice cultivating more understanding, more compassion? How do we actively remind ourselves that behind every shocking headline, every weird tweet, every public fall from grace, there's a real complex human story, someone who desperately needs support, not just more judgment?
So what will you choose to see next time?
What will you choose to focus on? Maybe the biggest deep dive we need is into our own capacity for empathy.